Hi everyone, this is Danelli. I am talking about key facts about journaling today. Um, One of my favorite topics. I love to talk about journaling, and I've been practicing journaling since 2010, give or take. I think I started in earnest about like September, October of 2010. When I decided to take a year abroad in England. I studied at King's College and I took a few different classes there. The education system is a little bit different there, but I learned a lot of things at King's College that really changed my life. And one of those things was journaling. So without much ado, I'm gonna switch this um, PowerPoint page. So, a little bit about journaling. Um, Journaling has been around for a really, really long time. One of the writers that has made it super famous has been Jane Austen, and she used it to um, pretty much as like a plot technique to move her narratives forward in a lot of her novels. It was known for a really long time in Europe and England as a woman's activity. Um, but it really has not been like restricted to women. It's actually been practiced for a really long time by both men and women as like a social tool, a tool to network, a tool to create alliances, to negotiate marriage, as a tool to um, pretty much keep in contact with like uh people abroad, and all manner of like letter writing is included in women's like writing. Traditionally, what would be considered women's writing was journaling and letter writing. um a little known key fact about journaling and letter writing is that a lot of men in classical times actually practiced it. It was kind of part of what would be considered like traditional education methods, and also um, it was practiced by the high elites that had access to ink and paper. And because paper and ink were extremely expensive, and only the like top politicians and the wealthiest elite were able to have access to ink and paper. And so writing and journaling and letter writing, and like chronicling facts about events, and writing books and chronicling history books and history facts, all of that was like part of what only the elite could do. So when like trading made ink and paper a little bit more accessible, it started to become something that uh, anyone from like the upper echelon to like middle class, lower middle class was able to do and access. And generally, you needed to be literate in order to do that, like to write, to practice writing, to journal, to write letters, to communicate. Um, and after like the educational revolution, and like paper became more accessible, ink became more accessible to people of all social classes, also practiced by like the high elites in the classical times. Um, so why is it helpful? Like what part of like education does this like practice of journaling fit into, or what part of therapy or what part of society does it fit into now? Really is a part of it is part of expressive arts therapy. A lot of people practice journaling as a way of like um, working through like psychological or psychiatric issues long term. I would also highlight that a lot of expressive arts therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists would recommend that it be used as like part of our everyday psychological emergency kit if you are struggling with like consistent mental health issues or are dealing with like the long-term effects of trauma. So this is something that um, the middle class to wealthy or the elite took advantage of a lot when they had access to writing and to expressive arts forms of writing, which is like journaling. Journaling, like free writing, chronicling of your day, expressing your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, um, in like a day by day manner was considered a way of like um, performing psychological emergency uh, services basically to yourself, like in the event that you don't have access to a therapist or somebody that's able to help you process certain traumatic events. So I don't do expressive arts therapy. I'm not like a qualified expressive arts therapist, but I have explored the field through the research and the findings that a lot of expressive arts therapists have published. And so that's the way that I generally approach the field from. I take a lot of the research and I've incorporate a lot of it into my own teaching philosophy and the way that I work with everyday writing practices as well as like long-term writing practices that help for different types of um, like everyday writing or to achieve practical writing goals. I've also used it as a way of informing my teaching pedagogy, which is like teaching philosophy in the like everyday classroom. And I've used a lot of the research that informs expressive arts therapy, the psychology, to inform the reasons why I use journaling or I recommend journaling to my students quite often. Um, so some of the reasons why I like to use journaling is that it's part of bibliotherapy. And like I've mentioned in other videos, a lot of these things kind of overlap the same way as like educational psychology practices overlap. Again, I'm not a qualified educational therapist or educational psychologist, but I use a lot of the research in my work. And a lot of the like a lot of these different uses for journaling kind of overlap, but it's actively used in bibliotherapy, which means that you use journaling not just as a like daily form of expressing your thoughts. A lot of teachers will incorporate journaling at the very beginning of their class. They'll let students journal for 5 to 10 minutes. A lot of them will have them do activities first and then let them end with like 5 to 10 minutes of journaling and writing to have their students practice writing consistently and like start to build like some kind of consistent writing practice. Um, Also, bibliotherapy, the way that like it uses journaling or chronicling or even just like kind of like writing as an expression, is through combined use of like reading and poetry. So a lot of times instructors will have students read something and then write about it, journal about it, read something and then journal about it. It could either be like an in-class activity that's done consistently throughout the week or in a assignment that's like a permanent at-home assignment. It's a way of also gathering material for poetry, to build poetry. Sometimes, it depends on the instructor. There have been times where, I've heard of people that don't like students to write in a free write manner or like a stream of consciousness or in choppy thoughts. They really like full sentences, they like a full narrative. And so you'll have instructors have students and guide students on how to write because they'll give them guidelines. Other instructors have kind of given students free rein. They say this is your page for the day. You can, you know, write choppy sentences, you can write a poem, you can do whatever you want on this page and consider that journaling. The same with like sketchbooks, or the same idea applies to um, fictional letter writing or even real letter writing. And bibliotherapy, the idea behind that is to not just build a healthy like habit around writing and expressive writing, but to give students a space or people a space to express their thoughts freely. The idea is that it's private, relatively private, so you can feel free to express whatever you want on the paper. Um, that being said, there's always like a tricky, especially with certain students that are struggling with really particular mental health issues, instructors are advised to be very careful that they are still mandated reporters. So if they read something that's particularly troubling, and there have been concerns with the student in the past, then it's the instructor's responsibility to report that if the student's underage or if they might potentially like harm themselves in any way, they should be reporting these things. So there are guidelines and reasons why we're encouraged as instructors and graduate like researchers to look into like the different strategies and teaching methods and the ways that journaling, bibliotherapy, like fit into our day-to-day teaching. What are some benefits? Um, this is one of the reasons why I love talking about journaling, and I recommend it to just about anyone because it really is a cheap, extremely effective way of performing like emergency like uh psychological first aid on oneself and like helping others is that sometimes you can just sit down and like write about it. No one has to read it, nobody has to know about it. You can just like tear it up, shred it, burn it, do whatever you want, like perform some dark magic or dark spell on the paper and get rid of it. Like nobody needs to know or see it. You could just write it down. And I've done this myself a million times and I've recommended it to so many students, and so many students have gone back to me and said, you know what actually works to like burn that shit up once you wrote it down. Like putting it on paper is a great idea because it feels like you actually like expressed it and you like purged it out of your body and yourself, and then you got rid of it. It disappeared. There's something incredibly useful and magical about that. And it's an underrated thing that I think people don't realize actually really works. Other people love to keep their like written material for a lot of different reasons. Um, one of the benefits is like chronicling progress over a course of time or a period of time, like how you're doing, how you're evolving, how you're growing, how it's actually been useful. And it's also great to track how your mind and your thought process has changed from one like moment in time to like the present. And so it's great to see how like you're changing, your thoughts have like evolved over a period of time. And it helps with anxiety. It helps with like expressing what is causing anxiety, what you're thinking in the moment, what you're feeling, what thoughts are connected to your thought, like what thoughts are connected to physical symptoms, so that you kind of discover and you start chronicling what might be actually behind the anxiety, and you can actually use it as a way of like having more extended conversations with medical doctors or psychologists or psychiatrists as to what's going on, especially if the anxiety is incredibly debilitating and it's preventing you from um, like doing day-to-day activities. Believe it or not, um, a lot of people think that anxiety is just strictly mental health. issue that is like you need to trick your mind into like getting out of an anxiety attack. That's not necessarily true. Physical illnesses can trigger anxiety and you might not even know it. And sometimes tracking what you're thinking and doing at the time of when you're experiencing physical symptoms can help medical doctors determine whether the issue is psychological, psychiatric, or whether it's an actual physical illness that's triggering um, like other thoughts of sadness or whatnot. There's a huge misconception in society that like mental health issues can be just like trick you can trick your mind out of them, but that's not necessarily the case if there's an actual underlying illness. You're going to continue to experience the anxiety. For example, people don't realize that being low in sodium or like being low in certain kinds of like minerals or vitamins actually create um, issues where your body is not able to detox properly or is actually low on certain like vitamins or things that you need in your blood, and it's causing a cascade of other issues that end up in like anxiety like symptoms. So like the jittery feeling might actually be an actual illness that you're experiencing symptoms of, and it might not actually be a mental health issue. So having like the ability to track um, mental health thoughts and like mental health symptoms and issues in connection with like actual physical issues might be a great way of determining what the actual problem is. And then um, both seeking both help from psychiatrists and psychologists, but also a medical doctor at the same time might be something that like the journaling reveals that you need to do. Clearing your mind, mind clearing. A lot of people experience extreme, like extremely like disjointed thoughts, or they're like thinking two track of thoughts at the same time, especially women. And this is probably why a lot of women practice journaling or for a really, really long time. And it became so popular in England was because, as we all know, women, especially once they start like becoming like housewives or stay-at-home moms, and they are raising their kids and they're doing a million things at once, and then they have the husband, and then they have their social engagements, and then they have their own things to take care of. Like they have a million and one things on their mind, and that's separate from when they actually have anxiety and they actually have medical health issues. So, journaling as a way of like mind clearing is and has been a very effective way of dealing with like decluttering mental thoughts and decluttering mental junk that's going on, right? Not only that, but it also helps to um, clear thoughts that are related to gaslighting of any form, like related to abuse or cognitive dissonance. A lot of people kind of don't realize that cognitive dissonance can, it is a mental experience, but it can create vertigo, and it can create like very physical symptoms as well. So when you're experiencing two true but opposing facts or realities at once, and your mind cannot decide which one is real and which one is fake, but because they're both uh true, it creates a kind of gaslighty cognitive dissonance effect. Um, and it can create like extremely like distressing symptoms in an individual. This is why gaslighting and cognitive dissonance falls into the realm of like abuse, especially if it's someone or a group of people in particular causing it, or a particular set of thoughts causing it. That's something to like want that you want to chronicle and keep track of. And journaling is a great way of doing that. Meditational. A lot of people use it to meditate, like to kind of just um practice like the law of affirmation to uh, clear their thoughts before they go to sleep because it's a great way of like calming themselves down. They want to practice ways of like affirming self. So they remind themselves of their values through their journaling. They will express their thoughts after reading, like very um, personal reading material, whether it's religious material, whether it's like a novel they're really into or they're into personal development and they want to do some like meditational work that helps them um, just refine their decision making skills and like their to center themselves in their core personality. Relational. This is like something that I find one of the reasons why I love journaling, and I think it's such a flexible and like useful thing to practice. And it's relational. Like it helps with dating. It helps with chronicling why one date didn't work and the next one did work, and comparing and contrasting. It also helps like I've had friends that have used journaling through their note app on their iPhones and have contributed to like a page together as a form of like co-journaling and co-communication where they don't actually talk about issues, especially if they're having like trouble dealing with extremely uh I guess like political or like emotionally charged problems, or they're having like long-term negotiations about a problem or an issue, and they don't want to like actually engage in a fight face to face. They'll just kind of like do this type of like co-journaling. And I think it's one of the most like innovative, brilliant ideas I've heard of. And I've also heard of it being used for like marriage or relational counseling where therapists will have their clients start to write or journal together. And it's a practice that is recommended for to like improve their communication and the way that they phrase things and the way that they like talk about things, and also the pace at which they're exploring different issues. Because this is something that also can be like mediated with a therapist or a relational counselor, is journaling. Now, there's also one of the reasons why I personally started to use it a lot was through um, the ways that it actually improves academic writing. So it isn't just used for teachers to help like students think about writing differently in the classroom in like a K through 12 or like any other kind of educational setting, to just get them to like do some writing, but also as a way of like and like highlighting and improving parts of the writing process that are incredibly critical in an like college university setting. So things like brainstorming and drafting. Brainstorming has an can look has can you can do brainstorming in like so many different ways. You can do free writing, you can do idea writing, you can do like picture imaging, visualizations, you can write poetry, you can write down a list of words that you like there's no one way to do brainstorming. And so journaling can become a way of like brainstorming ahead of when you have an assignment and start to jot down ideas little by little, way ahead before you actually even get to writing a draft. You can do also like free writing or um, what is considered um, um, like stream of consciousness and just jot down whatever comes to mind for an extended period of time and then go back and whatever you wrote gets reorganized into potential draft, right? Um, Journaling can also be used as a way of like building up inspiration over a over a period of time for particular types of writing that are going to be required in the future of you. So, say for example, you know that you're a community college student, and at some point you're going to have to write a personal narrative or a personal essay to get that grant, to apply to that university, to transfer. There's so many like requirements for like admissions like to colleges or whatnot that like require you to have kind of writing samples. So if you start writing and chronicling and journaling things that are happening to you in your life or events that were incredibly important, and you start expressing or chronicling how they happened or expressing feelings about, the event that happened, then you can go ahead and like use that material to later on inspire further writing material. Um, I recommend this a lot to students that have particularly traumatic backgrounds and who come from underrepresented demographics in colleges or university because it really helps like beginning to explore um, diversity points, right? The reasons why you are an exceptional student, the reasons why a college should take you in and like admit you to their college and give you financial aid and funding and like extend other kind of like assistant programs to you. So if you start journaling early and start making a habit of like using prompts to explore your past or hardships that you've experienced and how you've overcome them and what they've taught you, then you can go ahead and start using that for like start saving that and using it for future material that is going to be needed for like personal narratives or personal essays. Um, and this is something that I again like I really love to encourage students to practice because I've lost track of the number of students that are incredibly intelligent, brilliant, and they've had a really hard time because they're either like either or they either had to drop out of school because of like issues at home or they had children too young and then they're trying to come back to school and or they're getting they're recovering from like personal um traumatic events like accidents. And so, like, there's so many reasons why they have an exceptional background and they have performed incredibly well academically. And then, when I hear their stories about them trying two, three times to get into certain kinds of colleges or universities, and they tell me that their personal essay or like narrative had nothing to do with all of these incredibly difficult things they overcame and like learned from, it's so hard to tell them that they should have been writing about that thing that was really difficult. And because like it's incredibly hard to access some of these events sometimes and put them on paper, but it is incredibly necessary in order for you to share like why someone should give you the opportunity to do or achieve whatever you want to do or achieve, right? Like go to that college or attend this or that program. And so like journaling becomes like a way of starting to work through those issues, like community communication issues really early on. Memory, neural pathways, and neuroplasticity. So like, and this is for students that like again have a lot of trauma in their background, but also have like family histories of dementia or Alzheimer's or any other kind of like related neural um, potential like neurotrauma in the future that they're like foreseeing might be a problem. But also like in the past to like help them kind of stabilize um, the effects of trauma is with memory. So a lot of people don't realize that extended periods of trauma or like continuous trauma can have an incredibly negative effect on neuroplasticity, which means memory pathways get like fried up in your brain, and then you have a hard time either remembering the trauma or accessing the trauma, or you have what would be considered like memory fog or trauma fog, where it becomes kind of hazy, like the details and the facts. Some people straight up just blank out and they don't have any memory of certain traumatic effects or events. And that is an effect of, extended periods of trauma, such as domestic violence, abuse, um, especially also like extended drug use or abuse. So journaling often becomes a way of like starting to do repairing work and to also preemptively address potential mental like neuro damage, neuroplasticity damage from like potential issues in the future related to Alzheimer's, to dementia that may be like inherited genetically from family members or whatnot. So this is a great way of reinforcing neural pathways and like starting to chronicle the facts early on, because one of the effects of these things is potentially self-gaslighting or creating or having an incredibly weak sense of self and having an unstable personal core because of that trauma, and like putting yourself in situations in which you experience cognitive dissonance because you're unable to decide which two opposing realities you would say like definitively choose over the other every single time, and that creates that kind of lack of stability, lack of like core sense of self, can create cognitive dissonance. So in effect, you can gaslight yourself and you can create or put yourself in position where you experience cognitive dissonance because of trauma. And that can create like recurring memory issues. So it becomes a cycle that you continue to relive and relive. And so journaling can help start to track that and also start to put like a stop to it early on or over the course of a period of time. And that leads me to the next thing, which is confidence. Because, like a huge part of learning and education is having a strong building and having a strong sense of self and a strong core. Confidence and self-efficacy becomes a huge part of learning. And so when you start to chronicle and journal for an extended period of time, whether you realize it or not, you start to build your sense of self, who you are, and you start to see how you've changed, and you start to like work on self acceptance and growth. That increases confidence over a period of time. And that also creates clarity for yourself on who you are and who you want to be. Because who you are right now isn't necessarily who you are going to be or who you want to be. And often journaling can help like clarify that. It also helps to clarify what your morals, your ethics, and your positions are overall, like what your values are overall, and like how those would change um, in any given situation that is slightly different, because they do change. Like your decisions would not always be based on the same value or the same like moral or principle if the situation changes slightly, right? So some facts and details might actually change the way that you make decisions, and journaling helps you keep track of that without you creating um with like cognitive dissonance or like self-gaslighting yourself. Visualizations. Um, so a lot of people love like, and this goes partly with like meditational work. They love to use journaling as a way of like accessing their future self and like visualizing who they want to be, and like really it's part of that like mentality of like act and be like who you want to be and write about who you are and who you want to be, even if you're not quite there. Like build your future self and like visualize your life through writing and through journaling and actively kind of like put intention and will into the writing and to creating that self through like a form of like visualization of your future self. Um, and like that is by like goal setting and goal keeping, like tracking the things that you do to achieve your goals, the steps that you're going to take, the breaking down the goals into other goals, right? Because, and this is something that I also communicate with my students quite often, is that sure, like you may want to enroll at UCLA, right? That might be your goal. A lot of times when I've tutored students, they tell me that's my goal. And then they start, and I, start talking to them about like, what have you done to get to UCLA? There are huge gaps in their reasoning or their thinking or their planning. They've done some things because they've focused a lot on that one thing, but they didn't stop to like map out the bigger picture. They didn't stop to map out the micro steps. So they realized that maybe passing this class isn't as simple as writing three papers, but they might actually need to go back and look at the syllabus and look at the things that might need tutoring for. Because if they, don't take those micro steps, they might actually end up missing the bigger or the medium steps, which lead to the bigger goal. And so sometimes like this journaling is a way of like visualizing, but also breaking down those goals into other smaller steps. And that's something that's incredibly beneficial to use journaling for. Oh, and I believe that's it. Awesome. So that was it for journaling. I encourage you to try it, regardless of whether you're a girl or a boy, woman or man. I've heard of so many women and men, both genders that have tried journaling and it's really worked for them in the like, in the long term. And that's something that a last thought that I want to end with is that, right? Like you're not going to see progress from one day to another. Um, but like when you start to journal, progress isn't something that you're going to see from one day to another. You need to actually consistently write and write for an extended period of time, which means that, you might have to pick it up once a week, once a month, maybe build a daily practice if you're having extreme symptoms of whatever, if you're going through a really rough patch. So build a habit out of it, like put it in your routine, in your schedule, but think of it as a long-term activity that you're going to engage in. Generally, people don't start to see how much they've changed or how much material they've collected until after like a couple months, a couple years, then you can decide whether you want to like pause and go back and read some of your material. If you're collecting material for, you know, an essay or a particular assignment, then you can decide like when you want to sit and actually review whatever you've collected. That might be helpful. But generally, I say, give yourself time to change, give yourself time to like achieve some of the goals and like rethink some of the things that you journaled about, and then like go back and kind of evaluate or reread some of your material. I've had so many students kind of tell me, I don't know what I was thinking dating that guy. Like, I wrote down what he told me, and that seems like absolutely crazy. Like, I can't believe I was ever interested in him. And so that's always like a fun thing to hear. Or, other similar things. Like, I can't believe I stopped myself from, saying this or that. Or I can't believe that, like, you know, um, I used to be afraid of like this or that, and you name it. So like a lot of these changes in who you are can be tracked, but only over the course of a long period of time. And then you realize, um, you start to realize who you are and what you're all about, and collecting kind of um, a chronicle of your own life is incredibly useful and helpful. And sometimes it's an incredible joy to see how much you've changed. So I really recommend it. I recommend that you stick with it for a long period of time. Don't get rid of your writing. Keep it. Keep everything you write. You never know when it's going to be useful or helpful. Even in a legal sense, it might actually be useful and helpful if you wrote down things that you've heard or you saw. Um, Especially for people that have like short-term memory issues or even long-term memory issues. Like it might be great to, sit down at a cafe and just like do people watching and then chronicle if you want to just practice how to write. You never know what you might actually have captured that could be helpful to someone else, right? A lot of people have donated their journaling to research, to studies that others are doing and that are, actively reading through journals to see how journaling helps for like expressive arts research and studies. So chronicling might actually help you, but also help other people in the future. If you've collected material that you have that you can share or that you're free to share with either like legal experts or other researchers or educators that might need or require or could use examples, right? Um, and that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that I get to see you in another YouTube video soon. So don't forget to like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. I will see you next time. Bye bye.